and I realized we would have enormous numbers of people that died. And I also realized that many of my firefighters and police officers would not be able to get out of that building on time because I had been involved in fighting many fires and many emergencies. And the only thing I could think of is, what can I do for them? First, we want to try to save as many as possible. But then I vowed that we would start a fund to take care of their families. Because if I'm going to ask other men and women to take on this burden of trying to save us and to try to deal with the terrible, awful reality of terrorism, then they have to know, in order for their morale to be strong, that their family is going to be taken care of. They have to know when they go into a burning building or into a nightclub or onto a bus or into a pizza place where these terrible things take place, that if, God forbid, something happens to them, that society, who they're protecting, is going to be behind them and able to take care of their families the way they would. I had 4 uncles who were police officers and 1 who was a firefighter, and 2 of them fought in the Second World War. And I'm sure that part of the reason they had the courage to do that is they knew that if they were lost, and one of them was lost for a long time and one for a short while, that their families would be taken care of, that they weren't being irresponsible in trying to protect their country. Well, your country is under constant possibility of attack. Thank goodness it doesn't happen as much now as it did in the past, but it's still an everyday reality. And the people who protect you, and all the citizens of Israel, and the people who come here have to know that if something happens to them, their families are not going to be abandoned. And OneFamily has, from the very beginning, and thank you very much for doing it, has stepped in and has filled that role. Government can't really do that. Government can protect us from terrorism, and your government, and now mine under President Trump, does everything that it can to protect us from terrorism. But terrorists, you know, don't care sometimes about whether they live or die. They don't care about the consequences, and they attack no matter what. And no government, no matter how good your government is, and I think your government is one of the best in dealing with security in the world. It's an example to the world of how to do that. No government can be 100% perfect. So then we have to step in, the people, and show other people that we care about them. And you've done that for 17,000 families. My goodness, I did that for 373 firefighters and about 50 police officers. And it was a very difficult mission. So I really empathize with you, and you have my support. My experience with this terrible plague of terrorism goes back to the very, very beginning when the PLO started hijacking airplanes. And then when I was United States Attorney in investigating Yasser Arafat for the killing of American citizen Leon Klinghoffer. And I was prepared to prove, if he came to the United States, and he didn't until Bill Clinton allowed him to, shame on him, for a number of things, including that. Well, I'm sorry. I'm not in politics anymore. I don't have to be careful. I can just tell the truth. But of all the things he did, some of which were, unfairly characterized, and he did some good things in Northern Ireland and elsewhere, what he did to your country was inexcusable. It was inexcusable for one reason: he empowered Yasser Arafat. I knew that Yasser Arafat had murdered hundreds of people. I knew he had ordered the execution of 29 Americans, including Mr. Klinghoffer, who was murdered for one simple reason. He was Jewish and he was in a wheelchair. And he was thrown into the Mediterranean Sea. Totally unjustifiable. The man never harmed anyone in his life. And probably none of the other people that were killed by him did. And then all of a sudden, Bill Clinton made him into a legitimate figure. Well, the man wasn't a legitimate figure. He was a murderer, maybe worse than most of the organized crime mafia people had put in jail. I can't think of an organized crime figure that killed more people than Yasser Arafat. And here I was watching my president with him. It was disgraceful. I was embarrassed as an American. So when he showed up for the UN 50 celebration to listen to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, I threw him out. And the president was very angry at me. And I said, my judgment of him will be far better than yours in history, because I recognize what he really is. He's a murderer, and he's a crook, and all the money we're giving him, that you're giving him, is going to him, not to his people. Israel has done more for the Palestinian people than the leadership of the Palestinian Authority. To this day, they steal all the money. We haven't had someone who really understands that completely in the White House until we had President Trump, who really understands what it's all about. And your prime minister has been, to a large extent, responsible for educating him about this. Not that he didn't know it, but we don't live through it. I don't think I would understand it as much as I do if I hadn't come here after the bus in Jerusalem was bombed. I think it was in 1996. And Mayor Olmert, I called Mayor Olmert from City Hall in New York, and I said, what can I do to help you? And he said, you can come here. Well, I thought he wanted medical supplies, homes, places they could come. But he said, I want you to come here because I want you to show the terrorists that they can't stop us, that they're not going to stop us from riding our buses, going to work, enjoying our entertainment, enjoying arts and culture, and being a civilized country in the middle of an uncivilized portion of the world. And boy, you really live in an uncivilized portion of the world. And you're a shining star. And I feel horrible when that's miscommunicated by a very, very corrupt press. And so when I came here after that bombing, and then I came here after the Sbarro pizza bombing in 2001, I remember going to Hadassah Hospital, where I'll go tomorrow, and I remember seeing this young girl. She was about 16, and her face had been all scarred with shrapnel from the bomb. And she said, will I ever be beautiful again? And I don't know much about medicine, and I said, well, you're beautiful now, and you'll be beautiful because medicine surgeons can do wonderful things. And now she is. But she was the lucky one, in a way, because a number of other people died. But if you don't see it firsthand, if I hadn't seen it with my people, almost 3,000 of them killed, melting in front of me because of 19 insane Muslim extremist terrorists. I had a president who wouldn't say those words. It's like trying to fight Nazi Germany and not saying Nazi. Hitler would think, well, you were afraid of him if you didn't say Nazi. Well, I'm sorry. The Muslim terrorists think you're afraid of them if you don't say Muslim extremist terrorism. That's our enemy. Not the whole religion, them. And I do that. I do that now as part of my security business. I do it now to the extent that presidents listen to my advice, or at least allow me to give it. President Bush did, and I respected President Bush's reaction to September 11. You can't imagine how much, because I couldn't have handled it without the support of my government. I respect your prime minister because he stands up to terrorism, and I very much respect President Trump because he's had to deal with the terrible complexities that have been handed to him because of the way President Obama mishandled it. And he has turned around in 2 years a horrible situation. Today I went to the embassy, and I would like to. I really wish I could show you the plaque I have on my iPhone, but it's a plaque that says that it was dedicated under the leadership of President Donald Trump, Vice President Michael Pence, and David Friedman. And you should really understand that you now have the best ambassador Israel has ever had in David Friedman. One of the things you want in an ambassador is someone who has the ear of the president. Well, he's been the president's friend for over 20 years, as I have, and then he has the ear of the president. And the president and he have accomplished something historic already, just in moving that embassy, because now my president is respected, because he keeps his word, and he isn't frightened by terrorists. My prior president was frightened by terrorists, or didn't care. And so I think we're going to see a lot of things flow from that. I can't imagine what they all are, but I think they're going to be very, very significant. But that doesn't answer the critical question. I know how to fight terrorism, and I'm not afraid of them. And so do all the people I just mentioned. But taking care of the victims, well, they live with it every day of their lives. When I went to funerals after 9/11, I would look at the little children, and I knew I had raised a lot of money for them, and I knew they were going to go to college, and I knew they were going to be economically supported, but I also knew there's no way to make up for the loss of a father for all your life. And so that's where money doesn't help. It helps, but caring and love helps. Knowing that there are people like you that care about them, believe me, that gets them through it, and it makes them whole. And that's why they understand that their family is not just their genetic family, it's the whole family. And for doing that, I think you'll be rewarded in a wonderful way by the same God that we all worship. You know, I always wondered when I traveled throughout Europe, and they would say, well, America should learn from us. I said, wait a second. Why do you think we fought a war of independence if we want to learn from you? Why do you think we became the strongest economy on earth if you think we're going to follow France, Italy, Greece, even Germany and Scandinavia, although Scandinavia is pretty darn good. They're not all the same. Their EU is a travesty. I was a big supporter of Brexit. I was surprised that it passed and that they got out of the EU, but I thought it was a prophecy of Donald Trump's election. Because like Americans, the English people said, enough of this tolerating their weakness and their inability to face reality. So President Trump is an essentially American thinker. And that's not bad, because I think I can say this because the people of Israel love America and we love you. But we've been the most successful nation on earth. It is true we've been blessed by God with a big, big country and great natural resources and very, very energetic people like you have who came to America from all over. Jewish people and Italian people and German people and Irish people, and I don't want to leave anybody out. And my city probably benefited from it more than any other. We're truly a city of immigrants. But why should we look for an example to Europe that is a failure? They can't even defend themselves. Frightened. France is frightened of terrorists. We're not frightened of anyone. Not just because we're strong, but because we're right, and we're decent, and we love people. And we know to love people and accomplish it, you have to have courage. Cowards can't protect people. So Donald Trump seeks his guidance from the soul of America. And I think your prime minister does, because he's really, he might not like this when I say it, he's really an American. He loves America. He knows American politics as well or better than I do. And my goodness, they're now torturing him because he loves cigars. I love cigars, and I've had more than one with him. And so did Winston Churchill, by the way. I tell you, if the world was like it is now then, like these people in America who are going after President Trump and the people here are going after, they would have put Winston Churchill in jail. He would have, but his paintings would have been worth a lot from jail, right? He would have sat there doing his paintings. So there are, luckily for both of us, in the history of the Jewish people, great people have come along at just the right time. I mean, we can go back to Abraham, and we can come to your prime minister and all the people in between, the people who built this country. And our people like that too. George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt and Ronald Reagan, who is my hero, and Donald Trump now. And they're people who look at things differently. They don't follow the norm that society tries to impose on them. Because the norm that society tries to impose on them is usually failure. Just be careful and don't do anything wrong and don't. So when you do something bold, you take a risk. So when you say you're going to protect people who are the victims of terrorism, that's a very bold thing to do, because you may be there all by yourself. But what you found is that the Israeli and American people have a big heart. They're not just brave, they're loving. And we love our enemies. That doesn't mean we're going to be stupid and let them kill us. But it does mean that if they're willing to take a step forward, we're willing to embrace them. If they stop teaching their children to kill us, we can start to love them and show that love. But they have to stop teaching people to kill us before we can do that. And we have to be ready to take care of the losses that we undergo as a result of it. And considerably more civilized. They don't have an Ayatollah, and women there aren't stoned. And I don't know, is Korea bigger than New York? But boy, they don't have Broadway. We're a heck of a lot better than they are. But are they dangerous? Of course they're dangerous. They can totally destabilize Iran, this region of the world, and they're doing it, and North Korea, that region of the world. So what changed? American presidents have been trying to deal with North Korea for years, and President Trump's standing up to Kim Jong-un, explaining to him just the reality of life. And you don't know the criticism the president took for this. Basically just saying a common fact to him. We could destroy you as target practice. You can't destroy us. We're way across the ocean. We have a nuclear defense that's massive. And we have a nuclear offense that is frightening. It's cataclysmic. You don't think that affected him? I think it did. So then he wanted to have talks. And our vice president has said some very, very harsh things about North Korea. Mr. Bolton has said even harsher things about, and he attacked them, or he had people attack them. Said horrible things about Vice President Pence, who happens to be one of the most decent men you'd ever meet, or about John Bolton, who's one of the smartest men I ever met. And President Trump didn't take it. Of course he wants to have this peace conference. Of course he thinks he can push Kim Jong-un over the top to denuclearization. But he wasn't going to just take that. He had to set ground rules for, who's in charge of this. So he called it off. And for about 3 or 4 days, everybody was criticizing him and how terrible, and how, like they did to Ronald Reagan when he walked out of Reykjavik and wouldn't give up Star Wars. I'm going to tell you a story about that before we conclude. And all of a sudden, Kim Jong-un puts out a statement he wants to denuclearize. He wants to denuclearize. My God. Now, I admit that probably means he wants to denuclearize in 100 years. But I think President Trump might get it down to 2 or 3 because he needs money. People of North Korea are starving, and the people of South Korea are enjoying abundance. And boy, that hits home more than anything else. And I'm pretty convinced that Kim Jong-un now is smart enough to know if he's going to survive, he's got to first solidify his people. So I think this will be a pretty successful meeting. I don't want to overstate it. I said today that Kim Jong-un was forced to crawl on his hands and knees to ask for a meeting. That was a metaphor. I don't think he crawled on his hands and knees, but effectively he did. And that doesn't come from the president, it comes from me. President Trump would never say anything that was as outrageous as that. Because sometimes you're mistaken, but you don't have the time to analyze whether you're mistaken, because in that moment, or 2 minutes, or 2 seconds, or 3 seconds, or 4 seconds, and I'm trying to figure out, does he have a gun or doesn't he? He's reaching up like this. I could be dead, and my children are going without a father. And this guy will go ahead and kill other people. So I don't like second-guessing that. And you better be darn sure that this was an outright, cold-blooded murder. So I don't know the case, but I would feel very uncomfortable about a prosecution of a soldier who's dealing with a person that he thinks is a terrorist. We'll take one more. Yes, ma'am.
How do you deal with the press that's so against President Trump? He's keeping all his promises. He's doing one amazing thing after another. And no matter what he does, the press is...
I'm going to repeat her question because the president will really like this. She said, how do you deal with the press and the way they deal with President Trump when he keeps all of his promises and does one amazing thing after another, like getting the hostages back from North Korea? Who the heck ever thought an American president could accomplish that? And now he's on the verge of hopefully a breakthrough. I just tell the president whenever he gets down about it, and he really does. I said, well, look at Prime Minister Netanyahu. He has such a good press. Every great American president has had a terrible press. The press is usually on the wrong side of history. And right now they're on the wrong side of history. They have become apologists for terrorists in some cases, particularly in the way they deal with it. And what I'm specifically talking about is not terrorism in general, but the Palestinian Authority. The one thing the Palestinian Authority has done well, that we haven't done as well, I mean Israel and the United States now, they've made themselves sympathetic. They're a bunch of sympathetic murderers. And I see in the United States how that happens. You have a man who kills a police officer, and everybody becomes sympathetic. And they find all kinds of excuses for why he's really innocent, or why he couldn't help himself. I don't know what it is in the human personality, but there is this fascination with criminality that allows certain people to become extremely sympathetic to them and then turn the whole thing opposite. So the way I deal with it is the way Ronald Reagan dealt with it. President Reagan, who I work for, used to read the New York Times every day. And one day his wife, Nancy Reagan, who I'm on the board of the Reagan Library and became very close to Nancy, and she loved him immensely. As you know, it's one of the great love stories in American history. She said to him, Ronnie, because she called him Ronnie, I didn't, I called him Mr. President, as I do my friend, President Trump. When he was my friend and he wasn't president, he was Donald. Now he's President Trump always. I talk to him on the phone and he calls me. I say, Mr. President. And he said, nah, Donald, Mr. President. Never going to forget who you are. When you leave office, you don't know what I'm going to call you. But now, you're Mr. President. Well, I think that we have to look at the press, and we have to have like a bit of a sense of humor. So Nancy Reagan said to him, why do you read the New York Times every day, Ronnie? It just gets you upset. He said, it doesn't get me upset. I read them. I even make notes about what they said. And then I do just the opposite. And it worked out well for him. He's now one of our great American presidents, liberated Eastern Europe. How about liberating millions of people? We only had a few presidents who were liberators. Obviously, Abraham Lincoln, and to some extent, Franklin Roosevelt, and then Ronald Reagan, liberated, without firing a shot. So I follow that advice also. I read the Times, I make notes, and then I do just the opposite. And the more they criticize me, the more I'm sure I'm right. Because they're wrong. They're wrong about Israel. They're wrong about President Trump. They're wrong about our economy, which doesn't matter as much. And they're mostly wrong about foreign policy, which matters a lot. And just like Ronald Reagan, President Trump is going to achieve great things. And he's going to live long because he's a very strong and healthy man. And he's going to get his satisfaction when he gets out of office. And I don't know that he's going to, no man ever solves every problem, but I think we have a real chance of solving these ones that are right in front of us, because I think his approach is the right approach, and he's got the right partner in your prime minister. I was going to tell you one last story, but I sort of run out of time. But I have to tell you that, to tell you something serious, actually. People ask me, how did you deal with September 11th? And how were you able to rally your people to respond to it? And I'll tell you how. We all deal with adversity, whether it's the loss of someone we love or the people you deal with. And I'm sure a lot of what you do is you have people who also have been victims of terrorism kind of help the people who are going through it. Because when you're going through a tragedy, you feel you're the only one, and your family's the only family that's gone through it. And if you can talk to people that have gone through it, it helps you get perspective. Well, on September 11, for a couple of days, I didn't really have my bearings as to how I would talk to people. But I went home that night. I thought about two things. I thought about, in history, the people of England and Churchill, and how they dealt with the Battle of Britain, which was in many ways far worse than September 11, because it was every night for about 9 months, and you'd be sitting in your homes, and your home could get bombed, and your children could be dead. But then, if they weren't, you had to get up that morning and take them to school and go to work, and then Churchill would go out there and stand, and the bombs would fall, and he would smoke a cigar. That's why I like cigars, and nobody should criticize them. He'd smoke his cigar, he'd let the bombs fall, and the people of London said, damn it, we can do the same if he can. And then I remember coming here for that first bus bombing with Mayor Olmert, and getting on the bus. I came here and I told all my friends, I'm going there to give strength to the people of Israel, and that makes me feel so good, because they're such great people. And I came here and I was amazed at their strength. I was amazed at their resiliency. I was amazed at the fact that they had internalized the fact that we have to live with this. And living with this means being able to go about our lives, because that helps to defeat them. If they can't stop us from going about their lives, our lives, we set them back. So September 11, I said to myself, if the people of Israel can do it now, and if the people of London can do it, then we can do it. And I told my people that. I said, if these great people can do it, we're great people and we can do it. And for that, I owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to the people of Israel, and particularly the families that have had to endure it. Many of us worry about it, but the people who are really the martyrs here are the people who have had to go through this terrible, terrible thing. It's going to be over someday, but the grief caused isn't, and you deal with that. And for that, God is going to bless you. Thank you.